also thank you, Laos, for inviting me. It's been a challenging year over year. I got so lazy because of the COVID, and just got so used to staying home and play with the dogs and make bread and stuff. So this is like almost like the first time in over a year that I came out and do something useful. So, thank you. Hope it'll be useful. So I'm gonna paint Cityscape today. I have already painted this one, so that's what I'm gonna be painting. And but before I do that, I want to share with you about the concept of Notan. And I'm sure that some of you already know this stuff though, so if you do, just bear with me, and just I'm gonna make it very brief, but I just wanted to talk about this before I start painting. So the Notan is, by itself, is a Japanese word for dark and light, and in an art form, it means harmonious arrangement of dark and light shapes. And I do Notan study here and there, along with other type of studies. And Notan study is actually a type of tonal value studies. And the regular tonal value study, I use about 4 values. You know, the white of the paper, light value, medium value, dark value. In the Notan study, I reduced that to just 2 values, white and black. So light and dark, 2 values. And the benefit of a tonal value, the Notan study, is that it reveals the skeleton of the painting, the underlining energy of the painting that holds the painting together in a way that's so obvious. So you can just look at the Notan pattern and see, oh, this is the structure of the painting. And I have a privilege of judging shows once in a while, and when I do that, and I really take a joy out of it. You know, it's really a great joy for me to see other people's artwork, wonderful, wonderful artwork. And when I judge, I go into the room and then just kind of scan the whole presentation, and then usually it's several paintings just pops out to my attention, and then they were just really attention grabber. And they happen to, most of the time they tend to be the ones that I give awards or some kind of recognitions. And they all, I shouldn't say all, but most of them have a strong tonal, the Notan structures in it. This is the original reference. So I decided I want to change this shadow, foreground shadow, to make it more interesting. So I put some white gouache to change that. I don't know if you can see it.
If you sit down, we can see.
So I just put that white gouache where I don't want the shadow to be. So change the shape of the shadow here. Okay, so I have made a drawing. Can you see that? No? Okay, I'm gonna sit down. I usually paint standing up so that I can see the whole thing, you know, not too close, especially the initial stage, but I'm gonna paint sit down this time. hopefully. My first stage is to establish the sky part and then the ground and put some color on this building. And I have mixed all these colors here because I know what I have to do before the painting dries. First, I'm gonna put some yellow color in a distant area, and then put some color on the building, and then I'm gonna put that blue color for the sky, and they have to be connected. So I can't just paint this building and then go get a cup of coffee and then come back and then do the sky. I can't do that. So, and then after I put the yellow, I'm gonna put dark at the bottom. It's kind of hard to see it in a painting because when I put the dark shadow all over it, but I really have to put weight on at the bottom of the building so that it will anchor down and then give some power. So, and then that has to be connected to here, so I have to do that at the same time. So I have 4 wells that I have mixed colors, and it helps to have this ready because when you start painting here, and this has to be connected to this, and then I gotta mix the color for this part, and I start mixing, and then the paint dries up, and I missed a chance. The way I paint it, the timing is very, very crucial. I got this mop brush. It holds a lot of water and pigment. And I have scratch paper. This is watercolor paper. It's just the back of the messed up painting. And I've seen an artist, famous artist, said, don't test on this paper, test it here, because this is where you're painting. I thought about it, but I think I would rather test here. I want to play safe. So.
Yuki, what is your color mix for that color?
This color?
Yes.
This is a mixture of yellow ochre and raw umber. So it's just earthy color for the building. And I'm going to put this, I need to cut around the figure and the car. And then I'm gonna put some blue for the sky. Cool down the top of the painting.
Is that mixed blue of some kind?
This is cobalt and cerulean. I got this little too far down here, so I'm gonna, and it's kind of hard to see. Sorry, the paintings, I'm painting on a quarter sheet, but it goes faster, so. And trying not to, and this part's gonna be darker, so I don't have to cut around this. So I got some color here for the building, cut around the figure. And while this is getting dried, I'm going to spatter some water because I don't want this part to look like I'm painting a living room wall. So this water kind of gives some random texture. And while this has a little bit moisture, I'm going to paint the background. This is opaque. I think it's called titanium gray. I do use both transparent pigment and opaque pigment. I'm not a purist, so I work both with the transparency and opacity. And then the reason I like to use it for the opaque gray for the background is because the opacity creates some kind of milkiness, you know, this color particularly. It creates some kind of milky appearance, and it creates, it helps to make it recede in a distance. So I put some gray in the background, and while this still has a moisture, I'm going to put some dark at the bottom. This is very, very thick pigment, and some people wondered why I'm not getting cauliflower here, because I'm touching where it's wet. The reason I'm not getting cauliflower that sort is because this pigment's way thicker than what I put downneath, so it's not causing a problem.
What is that pigment?
This is a mixture of burnt sienna, brown madder, and French ultramarine. And this needs to be super dark. So I'm just dropping some dark color at the bottom. And I'm softening the bottom a little bit so that it won't be just hard edge. Now, then I'm gonna get more tilt, and I'm going to paint the road. And this is just a pure water, clean water, and usually I just use whatever I have in the palette because you know, some people might freak out because, oh, she's making the mud, and I am making the mud, but I'm using all the colors that I already used elsewhere, so I'm not like introducing falling different color. So I'm keeping a color harmony in this way. So it's a gradated wash. It starts with the light value and then gets darker at the bottom. And in order to do that, you need some kind of incline. And I'm going to mop up the excess pigment so it will not creep up, make trouble. And while this has a moisture, I'm gonna lift some pigment with, this is all brush, so I can abuse. This is for the directional line. It gives extra sense of depth going into the distant. So I try not to get too carried away. Usually I just do 2 or 3. So that's my first stage. I have to do this in a one sitting. So if the phone rings, I ignore it. If the dog barks, and I just ignore it until I'm done with all this stuff. The next stage is to have this all dry and then start putting the windows. And I already told Connie that I'm crazy, so I'm gonna do the cooking show trick. So I painted this at home. So I'm gonna switch this. It's been baked in the oven, 350 degrees for 45 minutes. Because it's gonna take a lot of time for me to do all those windows, and I'm just gonna do one window here, so you don't have to get bored watching me do the windows. That. It's a repetitive work. So so basically all I did was let that dry, and then did the most of the window except one place. I also kind of tidied out, like when I put this dark color, sometimes I get into the figures or the cars, so I tidied out with the wet paintbrush to lift the colors where it shouldn't be. So, so I'm gonna do one roof. Actually, it's not window, one roof. When I do those window shapes, I try not to be too finicky. You know, I don't want this. I don't want to paint the windows like I'm painting, you know, drawing a line and painting inside. I don't paint that way. And so I try to paint, maybe I'll demonstrate one or two. I try to paint with the brush mark. Window, window, window. Instead of draw the line, here's a window, and I'm gonna paint inside this. That's, to me, it just kind of kills the mood of the whole painting. So the dry brush, I have to move my brush real quick. Sometimes I tap the bottom of my brush so that you won't have too much excess water, so I can make a dry brush marks real quick. So I try to paint with the mark of the brush, and I pay attention to edges. I don't want all the edges to be crisp, hard line. I like some of the edges to be soft, and I'm gonna demonstrate when I paint the roof here. So I pre-wet some area, or sometimes I spray it and then mess it up intentionally. So I'm gonna mix. Mix the color. That looks reasonable. And I'm gonna pre-wet here and there so that I will have soft edge. Oop, got too wet. And obviously I'm not trying to recreate exactly what's there. I'm just trying to show the essence of it. And I want this part to be connected to the sky. So I'm just gonna mess it up. There's some dark underneath the roof line. And I just pull this dark downward. I want this part to be soft. I can just put that water and just let it mess it up itself. So it's lousy. So that's pretty much all the windows I'm gonna put. Basically, I use the windows to as perspective tools also to create the sense of depth. So the windows in a distance, smaller, lighter, and the windows gets bigger and then higher in a way conform to the perspective line. And then also, I don't like sharp edges near the edge of the painting. So oftentimes I loosen up the edges near the end of the paper also. Okay, so done with the windows. The next is I'm gonna paint this side dark, and then I'm gonna paint this shadow shape. So I'm going to mix. Something dark. I'm using French ultramarine, burnt sienna, and brown madder. Little bit cobalt. I want it to be a little bluer. If I can. Does this work? No? Does it work? Can you see? Because when I'm sitting, it's really hard to see it. So I probably should have used a bigger brush. And I want dry brush. Peeking through. So And this is painted on top of this background. So it's overlapping. Overlap is also a very, very effective way to create sense of depth. And I'm gonna put some warm color at the bottom. And I'm going to cut around this figure. And I'm going to soften the bottom with the water so that you have some connection to the what's underneath. It won't be sharp edge. Can you see? No? Okay. Okay. I'm going to do the shadow in this area, so I'm going to have to mix a lot. I have to mix a lot because I don't want to run out the pigment in the middle of the wash. So I'm going to use a lot of cobalt blue. Lots of it. And this is one thing when I'm teaching the class, it's really hard for me to convince students to do is to have lots of puddle, the big puddle. Don't be stingy. You don't have to use a expensive professional paint if you don't want to, if you don't want to spend much money, but don't be stingy on the pigment. You have to have big pile, more than you think you need, because nothing is worth than running out the pigment once you start it, because when you're mixing and it dries up. So I'm going to start from the distant and then move this way. Now, the shadow is is one of those things. A little bit too dark is always better than a little bit too weak, to me, my personal opinion, because when it's a little too dark, it's kind of wow, strong, but it shows a strength, and often it comes out pretty okay. When it's wimpy, it's just, it doesn't show the courage, like you wimped out, and then it spoil the whole thing. So I'm always talk to myself, don't wimp out. You're just gonna go with guts. If it's too strong, it's okay. So I'm gonna start with this end, and I want the start to be soft edge. So I'm just waiting where I'm starting, so it won't be a sharp edge when I start. And I kind of assess the strength. Oops, I forgot one thing. I'm pre-wetting here, this area, because I want the soft edge here. and I have to do quick. This has to be one application. I need more. And this is where I want the soft edge. This red is kind of peeking through more cobalt. And I bring some of this shadow to this end. Okay, so now I'm kind of sort of connect that with the ground. So basically the same cut, and then I apologize, but I have to do this standing, otherwise it's, I try to kind of bend down, but this has to be done standing so I can see that. So I'm gonna bring this, I probably need more. I'm a super messy painter, so I'm gonna, and I kind of, this needs to be connected, so I'm kind of trying to connect it. Then I'm gonna move downwards. I'll put thin lines. And I'm gonna go like that. So I have some light value peeking through. I will sit down. We got some more time, and so the painting pretty much done. The major part is done. So I had this building, and then I got this dark shadow, and this shadow has to be connected. And all I have to do is just put in the cars and some figures, and put the directional line. The major part is done. So I'm gonna, usually I kind of dry this so that I don't mess up, but I can probably do that if I'm careful. So I'm gonna start putting cars and figures a little bit. So I'm gonna put this, I'm done with this one. So I'm gonna start with this figure in the back. And this is a small figure because he's supposed to be in a very, very distant. So I'm not gonna like do a the face or anything like that. It's just a dark figure. And I have to be a little careful when I do the lengths because the shadow's still wet, so I have to use very, very thick pigment. So that's it. For the cars, sometimes I paint inside of the top part, but for this one, I have so much dark, you know, the shadows, cast shadows, dark value, so I'm gonna keep the top part with the white of the paper, and I'm just gonna paint the bottom part. And my my gray, I'm gonna squeeze out a little bit more. The same gray that I use for the background. It's a little bit opaque. So I'm gonna, no, too thick. Can you see this? Too small? I don't mind if you can't see it. I don't mind people coming up and see it. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm not a threat to you. So I just put a gray color, and then at the same time, I'm gonna drop in a dark at the bottom and connect with the tire. And this is a car in a distance, so I don't have to be too precise. And then try to connect that with the shadow. And this one I'm gonna put little bluish color. So I'm keeping the top part with just the white of the paper, and connecting the bottom. This is just a dark whatever I had in the palette. And I'm going to soften the edge with the brush with just the water in it. And while this still has still have a little moisture, sometimes I just drop water And I might drop, I'm running out of clean space here, but for the tail lights, I drop in some color. Okay, it needs to be a little redder. And I might actually put just a little dark color for this one, so that I'll have little connection to the background. So it won't be just super cut out and paste shape. So I'm just gonna bring this darkness. So this will be connected to that. And I can wipe. The figures. I use mixture of cadmium red and yellow ochre for most of my figure, the face. So I'm gonna drop face color, and I'm gonna kind of stretch it with the water, bring it down. Why I still have a color? I'm gonna do this guy here. And stretch with the water. And I always have trouble what color the clothing and I should paint, and usually I just pick the color that I use elsewhere, so it won't be like, you know, I have this limited palette painting and then all of a sudden I have yellow figure or pink figure. It's just, I think it will look kind of out of place, so I try to keep the color harmony in my painting. So I use lots of blue, French ultramarine or cobalt blue, so I'm gonna use the same color. And I can always make the clothing white. So sometimes I just put the color inside of this coat and give this person a white clothing. And dark color for the pants. And this has to be connected. Connection is important. And I'm gonna, this lady, dark clothes. And I'm gonna let it bleed to the person next to it. When I have two figures side by side, I don't want one figure. I want that to be I want that to have some relationship. So I let the color invade to the figure next to it. And some here. Okay, we got like 15 minutes. I'm just gonna briefly, quickly put the clothing on this main figure. This is on the top of the shadow, so I have to use very thick paint. And so I'm using some cerulean. I'm gonna have to stand that because I can't really see. And just and dry brush for the legs. And in order for the figures to look like he's walking, I usually give 1.5 legs. And here. So that's pretty much it. And all I have left is just a calligraphy, those lines. I always have lots of fun doing the lines. Another thing I forgot is to re-establish the directional line, because I pretty much lost what I did here. So I'm going to put dry brush, directional line, I'm sorry if you can't see it, but it's too hard to do sitting. And directional line. And so I'm coming from this line. Sometimes it might be safe to just kind of give pencil line. So it's coming this way, and it gets bigger, something like that. And it's shoulder motion. Don't draw like that. It's shoulder. The whole shoulder moves. And clumsy line. If I make a clumsy line, I just ignore it and then try to do the better one on the top of it. I'm a little nervous because my first one was clumsy. Okay, I'll do this one. And it's lost and found. You don't have to have a whole length visible, and it's some, you know, it's usually, it's better not to see the whole thing. And you can fix this
clumsy one. You have to be careful, but just water. Use a soft brush, and then just tap it over. I can do this because the background is light. I wouldn't do that with here because when you do that, it's a normal. So, and this is something to do with the drum that some of the Milan street has, and I tried not to do this too neatly. These lines, the more spontaneous, the better it is. And so I'm holding a paintbrush rather far away instead of, I'm not doing it like I'm writing a letter. I'm holding a little bit further. So that's pretty much it. It's a messy, but I hope you got some idea about the process. So basically 3 stages. I do the initial wash of sky, the building, and then the ground, and let it dry, and then put the windows, and then paint the shadows, the dark building on the left side, shadows on a building in the front, and then the last stage is to paint the details, cars, figures, lines. Do you have any questions?
What's the name of that last brush you used?